Hello everyone, thank you for coming back to my channel. Today's card is going to be another birthday card, and apologies in advance for any pictures you might see in front of the faces in the beginning and end of the video. It's just to protect the privacy of the people that I make these cards for, just so their faces aren't plastered all over the internet. So I wanted to show you how this card initially was when I created it, and with a different background. And after playing around with the placement of everything, trying to figure out final details of the card, realized I wanted something else. So I turned to the star confetti die from Hero Arts and thought this might be more interesting and give that kind of little more ooh-ah flair when you look at the card. And here is the Polaroid die from Paper Smooches that I use for the main concept of the card to show the camera and make Polaroids, make faux Polaroids, I guess. It's a different way to say it. So I decided to use some silver reflective cardstock to cut out the confetti die for the background. Again, I wanted some flair. The original background with the black cardstock was a little too boring for me. It kind of faded, and so I wanted something that would pop out a little bit but not be too distracting. So I'm using my Spellbinder's 2-in-1 tool here, and I'm using the, what do you call it, the squeegee end of the tool here to get out the extras of the confetti. With dies like this that are very intricate, it could be a pain to poke out every single little detail of the scraps. So that's a way to get it out fast. I wanted to play around with some vellum because it's not my strength, but I thought, oh, that'd be a good way to make it a little more classy, but also keep the intent of the original card style that I wanted. So I'm playing around with the dies here that I cut out and colored off screen with the Polaroid dies, and just kind of figuring out what I want to do in terms of the placement and the composition of the card. So I knew that I wanted to make it appear as if the camera is shooting out pictures of myself and the person I was making this card for, and make it appear as if, we were taking pictures like actual Polaroids. I thought, oh, okay, let me try to create a card out of vellum to where it's, I still have the face of the card with the Polaroid and the image that I wanted, and the background of the confetti die, but then also the whole form of the card is composed out of vellum. And I thought, oh, okay, that's a different way to do it. So I'm playing around with it to make sure that I can still see through it on the inside of the card when the recipient opens the card. But at the same time, I didn't want it to be flimsy. Vellum isn't exactly stiff like a basic card. It's not like 110-pound cardstock or anything like that. So I wanted to potentially add to it, but I was trying to figure out if I could do that without adding cardstock, or if I just needed to add additional layers of vellum. And so you see me kind of playing around with it here, and decided to just stop thinking about it and give it a stab and see what develops along the way. You guys know my style. That's exactly what I am trying to go for. Just create and have fun with it. Play around with it. Make mistakes. Figure out if you like it. And if not, then move forward. So here I'm showing you on my Tim Holtz trimmer. You can use this as a sort of measurement tool to where you put the blade down and then push your cardstock up against the blade, and that will give you the measurement of where, if you want to duplicate a measurement. And so that's exactly what I did with the vellum. I measured the cardstock and then cut the vellum the same size, and here I am just checking it. Again, you'll see me do this throughout the video. I'm constantly checking to make sure that I'm not missing a little step, which can happen very easily when you're making and creating cards like this. And so I really want to make sure that again, my main point is that when you open the card, I want to be able to see the confetti die outline from the inside of the card. So I have decided to give it a shot, and I'm using some Barely Art liquid adhesive glue here to put together the multiple pieces of vellum to compose the foundation of the card. And I knew this was going to be tricky because I've tried to use tape runner before with Vellum and it completely shows. And so I wanted to try to make it as invisible as possible. And so this is a chance. And, it barely art precision glue comes out white, but it dries clear, which is great. And so, thank God for the precision needle tip. I can make extremely fine, invisible lines of precise, glue streaks to where even though it's coming out as a line, when I push down on it, it's going to spread even more and hopefully evaporate. At least that's what's happening in my mind. I'm hoping for it. And so I'm just outlining all the main creases of the card to make sure that it sticks together and appears as if it's just one piece of vellum. And so I'm lining it up here and again trying to make it seem as if it's like its own cardstock in a way. And note that I did also put glue at the crease in the half fold where the card is because I wanted to that part's going to be the active part of the card. It's going to open and close. So I want to make sure that's nice and secure. Using my bone folder not only to make sure I'm pushing any extra glue out, but also to try and make the glue spread out as much as possible to where it becomes nearly invisible. And I think it turned out pretty well. What do you guys think? Yeah, of course you can see a little bit here and there, but as it dries more and more, it's going to become more and more invisible. And so I'm pretty happy with it. I'm going to keep moving forward. And so I'm taking my die cut, my confetti die cut here to, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take the liquid adhesive and glue it to the front of the card and use it as the background of the front of my card here. But same sort of concept, I really want to make sure that when I use the liquid adhesive, I'm doing extremely thin, small lines so that when it presses down or dries, it's not going to be seen. Again, I'm constantly checking to make sure that my concept is still working. I can still see the confetti dye as you open the card. But I realized as I did that the back end of the card felt really flimsy, and that's not going to be fun for the recipient. So I thought, okay, that probably means I need to add more vellum to make it a little more sturdy. In the meanwhile, I'm trying to avoid using additional cardstock here because the concept is I want to make it seem as if it's see-through, invisible in a way. And so I'm cutting out an extra piece of vellum to uh, match what I already have going. And again, here I'm going to use the same measuring uh, tip here with my cutter, and that way I can make sure it's the same measurements for what I already have for my existing card. It's a nice little neat trick. You can also do this with your scoreboard as well, but maybe I'll show that in a future video. So I cut two more layers of vellum because I thought, okay, let me just play around to see how thick that's going to look. And again, making sure that I can see my confetti through the inside of the card, making it see-through. And so far, it's looking okay. It kind of looks like a book right now because they're not glued together. But main point, again, I can see through it. So, I think it's going to work. It's going to give me exactly what I want in terms of the structure for the base of the card, but then also the cool little see-through element when the recipient opens the card. And so hopefully what's happening in my head actually comes through and when I put the card together. So you'll see I have 3 layers of vellum, and I'm just going to use my liquid adhesive again to do those thin lines and make sure that they are nice and secure. Reinforce that with my bone folder to not only make the creases nice and crisp and sharp, but also making sure that, again, I put the glue out, or I spread the glue out to make it as visible as possible. So, it's still a little flimsy. I'm not completely happy with it. So you see me kind of play around there with some cardstock. I'm not using a 110-pound Nina cardstock there. I'm going to be using some 80-pound Nina cardstock. So that way it's a little more thin, but not as thick as the 110-pound, obviously. And that way I kind of figure I get to keep the integrity of the vellum and make it work. I'm not as worried about it because I'm only going to be using it on the back side of the card there. So you'll see I'm not doing it on both sides. So that way I can still have the see-through element of the confetti die. And if I put it in between the two existing flaps of vellum, it makes it look as if it's just vellum, which I was kind of surprised about. So I was like, yes, that's perfect. That's great. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to keep that. And that way I get a uh, stiff foundation so that I can write in the card and it's not flimsy when I write on it, but also when the recipient opens it, it's not flimsy. So again, repeating the same process with a liquid adhesive, just making sure I have those thin lines that are going to evaporate really nice and smooth, nice and well. It was kind of interesting because as you add more layers of vellum, I felt like it was easier for the liquid adhesive to disappear. And same was true when I added the cardstock. It didn't feel like it was as easy to track as if you just had one layer of vellum. So nice little thing to keep in mind for future cards if I decide to try this again, or if you try to do vellum cards, and how to hide liquid adhesive when you put the card together. Something to keep in mind. So just making sure that everything's nice and even there, because I want to again make it seem like it's one layer of vellum, and I want to try and make it look very neat and see through for the confetti die again. So double checking everything, making sure it works, and it does. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm becoming more and more happy with it because it almost looks like paper there. You see how the multiple layers of vellum makes it look like it's actual cardstock. So kind of cool. All right, so it's finally time to put on the confetti die to the front of the card. I'm happy with it. I'm pretty consistent. I'm being careful of making sure that everything lines up pretty well. And the glue is hidden, nice and hidden, and I get my see-through feature when you open the card. So I just want to make sure that I have enough glue because this is going to be the base of the card and we're going to be adding elements on top of it. So we want to make sure it's nice and sturdy. And so I am just playing around with the placement here to making sure that what I want to be shown when I put the other elements, the camera elements on top of that, that it matches with how I want it to all turn out. So you'll see me playing around with the placement of this here, and that's the advantage of liquid adhesive. You get a lot of wiggle room with the drying time, and so if it's not right, you get to move it around, and it's okay. It won't mess up. But you see, what I didn't account for here is the vellum on top of that silver cardstock. It just wasn't sticking, and I was being too cautious. I was putting too little glue on those pieces there. And so I have to go back again and really make sure that I put enough adhesive because, again, I want to make sure that it sticks because this is going to be the centerpiece of the card. Okay, so now that I got that on, I get to play around with the image pieces of the camera. So what I'm doing here is I'm checking to see if I can see through it when you open the card, and it's pretty faint, so I'm not too worried about it. I just want to make sure that everything is sticking together, not falling apart. I was really worried about the glue, not putting enough glue and the vellum pieces falling apart. Okay, so I put post-its over the faces of the picture here, just again for confidentiality. So I'm playing around with the placement of where I want all the elements. And here you see I've cut out uh, confetti uh, elements in playing around with what colors I want and where I want the placement to be. So I'm just kind of playing around, experimenting here. That dog bowl, by that is a dog bowl. My dog passed and had a hard time getting rid of some of her stuff, and I ended up keeping a lot of her bowls because I said, "Oh, they're the perfect size and perfect way to keep a lot of the scraps or die cuts as I cut things out." I thought, perfect. So it's kind of a fun way to keep her memory with me. So I'm just finishing up some cleanup with the confetti die cut out here with my tool-in-one tool. And I'm gathering all of the confetti pieces. And so here I can play around with where I want the placement to be. And you can't see it, obviously, but in the picture there are three of us. And so I'm trying to see if I can put some of these confetti pieces integrated into the picture to where it looks as if the confetti pieces are falling on us in the picture versus kind of just around us in the picture. And so I'm trying to make the Polaroid look as real as possible, in other words. Kind of like I guess, somewhat of a three-dimensional element, right? And so you can kind of see what that's going to potentially look like. And I'm pretty happy with it. So I just move all of those pieces to the side so that I can play around with it. So what I'm doing here is just putting some liquid adhesive onto my surface, and that way I have a little pool to play around with. And so I'm using my stick it tool to pick up all these little confetti pieces, and then I'll dip it into the glue a little bit, and then I'll adhere it onto the picture, um, to 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 the element of the picture. Um, This tool is pretty good. Mine kind of came defective, so I had to play around with it to make the adhesive come out of the tool, and so that's why you'll see me sometimes bounce around to using it and sometimes not. But it's a good tool. There's a couple of different versions of this tool. If you're interested in it, it helps with the little tiny pieces like this to help you really pick things up when you can't exactly do it with your fingers. If you have big fingers like me, it's really, really helpful. And so you see me even trying to get it off of my fingers, and I'm realizing, oh, these pieces are so small that when I try to press it on to secure it, the glue is oozing out onto my fingers, and then it sticks to my fingers. So I get a secondary tool. I get my pick and use it as like my left hand, and use it as a secondary tool. And look at that. Look how much easier it is. And so if you don't have that, then you can improvise. You can get a toothpick. Um, you can even use one of your sharps, one of your cutting tools, and just close the blade and use the point as your pick if you don't have a pick. Oh yeah, and don't hit your camera while you're uh, don't get too excited when you're having fun with all this confetti. Look at that. All right, so here I am. I am placing the Polaroid outline. What I'm doing here is I'm taking these mini Post-its to capture the position of the Polaroid picture. And that way I know that that's where I want the Polaroid frame outline. And once I put on this adhesive, I can put it exactly where I had planned for it to go earlier. And there's just kind of like a little hack for you to play around with, and make sure that it's exactly where you want things to be placed. You'll notice I'm kind of offsetting the Polaroid picture to where parts of it are hanging off the side of the card. Don't worry about that. That's okay because I'm going to cut it off. I want that to be the case because to me it just kind of gives it a little more interest and something to look at. And just taking a paper towel to sop up all of the oozing adhesive that's coming off of the back end. And when I'm done with this card, I'll go ahead and cut off those pieces, and it'll just kind of make it look a little more real. You so excuse the monkeys there, but again, I'm just covering the faces of the recipient so that I can protect their privacy. So just playing around here with the positioning of all the items on the card. Again, I want it to look like the camera is taking multiple Polaroid pictures. And so there I am using my mini post-its to uh, capture the placement of the main Polaroid with our heads in it. So that way I can put it exactly where I want it and it's all going to fit. And then the other Polaroid pictures, I'm not actually putting other pictures in it, but I have the frame outline and they're going to just be background. Um, I did die cut and color that camera off screen with some Copic markers. Nothing special, so I didn't think it was worth recording. I just did some quick coloring. But here I try to, it's a cake image now. I tried to create these images in a way where it's not going to block the positioning and integrity of the card, and so you can still get an idea of how the Polaroid pictures are being placed, and seeing how I kind of offset everything to the way that I want it to make it look like there is a pile of Polaroids essentially. Flipping it over is typically what I do when it comes to adhesives. I feel like that way I don't accidentally scratch or move the pieces around. And here I am just cutting off the parts of the Polaroid pictures that are hanging off the side of the card, like I mentioned earlier. And you'll see me do this final piece. I decided the inside of the card looked a little boring. Even though I like the cool see-through element of the confetti die, I wanted to just do a little bit something on the other side. It was too white, and so I took some gray cardstock and just kind of put a little internal frame in the inside so that I could write it. And there it is. I hope you like the card. Feel free to comment. Again, here's the bear pictures, but that's the final card. Thank you so much for hanging with me throughout the card, and hopefully it inspires you to create some things and make mistakes and see what comes of it. Mistakes are great. Embrace it. Have fun with it. Create and make. Yeah. Subscribe so that you can see the next card, and I hope to see you again next time soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.